Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Now, I've got Tony back, and this is really good timing because I've had two people in the last week asking when I was next doing a show with you, Tony.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they was like, "What's happened to Tony?" And I'm like, "I should find out." And then you got in touch with me, so this is really good timing. Obviously, people are in need to hear your
But,
wise wisdom.
oh, don't put it like that. I enjoy talking with you so much as you're so in tune, so to speak, and flowing and open and so on. You're not.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, we was talking just before this show about
about.
us talking to each other, but to make a conversation going, you started talking about a third person. So maybe you would like to speak a bit more about that.
Yeah. Oh, I can start on that. It's various elements and glimpses to do with language and the mystery of language and the phenomenology of reading and writing, which is to me quite extraordinary. And it's one of the obvious features of our life today that is taken for granted by most people. And I think it hides there's such a lack of curiosity about it. For example, how did this whole process really begin? In which, of course, the usual representation of it is done by people in the field as a kind of accumulation of some kind of accidental things which in themselves don't mean anything, which just happen to come out with people talking to each other and that kind of thing. But and they all, because everything has to be, of course, reduced to an accident because there can't be any purpose in the universe. And I think this is more and more, this is obsessing me, this rampant ideology of, have to make everything in nature and so on meaningless.
Yeah, I'm quite worried about it. I notice it more and more, which is why I try and do my little shows of saying, no, there's more to life than just it being an accident. I'm not a Big Bang believer, but maybe there was a Big Bang in the divine source starting the universe. Maybe there was a big, but I don't like all this. Everything was done by accident, and that bats learned to have sound sonar, for example, because they couldn't see properly, and it was just an accident that their hearing started getting better and things like that. Or we learn something through science because there was an accident that created a misunderstanding of something, so they've learned something from it. Maybe that's a development, but not a development of how we as humans develop. Surely we had conversation because it was needed. It probably wasn't gossip. People gossiping, was it? It was probably because they wanted to say something that was important to each other. They probably talked with a need.
Well, I pause because I'm reflecting on this kind of conversation for something, for some purpose, which is, of course, then the standard kind of way of explaining things. This developed because it was needed, and so we have this need over one side and this phenomenon over the other. Because there's something for me in this realm, like I would connect talking with things like humor. I was usually obsessed trying to get a basis, the idea that evolution is driven by beauty and humor, not just utility and survival and so on. It just you just look around and see a beautiful butterfly or a funny little creature running around, a little mouse or something, and you think, well, the evolutionary process must have a smile on its face sometimes with this and that sort of thing. But then it leads to appreciating things for themselves, because they say this, it has to be for something else than itself. Uh, you see how clumsily I am expressing it. It's that it's language, because you're a fan of Rudolf Steiner, I know, and those light is saying I may have quoted it on the previous conversation, that to his audience, you do not think, it's Latin that thinks in you. Because he was addressing, of course, an educated audience in his time, not an ordinary kind of audience. But that was it, Latin thing. And I was thinking, I talked to Debbie about Giambattista Vico, who influenced James Joyce with a theory that it's language that is intelligent and people are not intelligent. And this is inversing because it's all full of the human species being so clever it invented language, and that shows how clever it was. But no, it's like the language invented humans. And you think, this is nonsense, because we're so disposed to thinking everything's there because it's either an accident or is what people have invented or done. And so you've got this idea of it coming from people. And I loved, and it's not only Bennett, but I can't remember the other reference, but his saying about, you only think about beings who do things, but let us think instead about doings that be things. Which is terrific, it's this whole wrong way. And this fixation is then it ties in for me with, I'm still struggling away, pressed in my futility of doing what I call my finale about the Enneagram. And I wanted to establish it as this concern with action, with processes, and why it's so much more healthy than the fixationist thing, because it's looking at, the more static world of these having types of people. And it's all to do with looking at beings who are the sources of things instead of this action being interesting. Because for me, the Gurdjieffian Enneagram and all associated with it is interested in energies, in actions, in transformations. It doesn't matter. Having figures who do things, who create all this. It's all this what Bennett called the megalanthropic epoch, as he asked, according to him, epoch of mind, where what was central was the idea there were individuals who did things, who made things, and it was all in the individual, and which tended towards our modern society, which is so fragmented into atomic people and so on. So there's all of that. My God, I'm getting off track already. But
well, I just wanted to say, with language, though, sort of going back to what you were saying at the beginning of for children, if you can talk to a child in a certain way and they understand and they learn to develop how to use language, don't they? I've worked with lots of children over the years, and I see how children are just so eager to learn, aren't they, as we all know.
yes.
But if they haven't got, I don't know, parents, peers or whatever that do much talking or spend so much time talking or shouting or arguing, they don't develop how to use language and how to express themselves and how to explain themselves properly. So language is important in that point for helping a child develop and transform themselves. I've seen children transform where they've learned to talk to people that actually are interested in what they're saying, and then talk back to them as if they're talking to them, with them, a conversation rather than at them. And that's quite an important development that I've just seen in people. It helps children transform and hopefully would encourage them to go and learn about language and how to express themselves.
Yeah, this reminds me of this very critical, actually, Russian pedagogue or teacher of education called Vygotsky. He had the thinking, as they call it, an interiorization of conversations. The child's involved in a conversation where you get this dynamism, this interplay between proposition and counter proposition and exchanges and so on. And he begins to absorb it into himself. Then it creates this thing we call thinking in them, because thinking does depend on some kind of inner separation. And it's like that. So there is, and there's I've reached a point. I wanted to jump to this about you, because been involved with Bennett for so long, and that he was involved with Gurdjieff and those ideas. We call it the fourth way. But he was also extremely open to all kinds of other spiritual authorities or ways on this kind of thing, and he really went out of his own way to serve them in some way, get into them. He wasn't fixated entirely on Gurdjieff, um, but it was very strong for me in recent years, or the last 40, 50 years. I'm that old. Is that this kind of tribalism of all the different groups with their different adherences, so the anthroposophers or Gurdjieffians or God knows what is, or self-realization or NLP, or Scientology, even whatever the hell it is, it's all these things, and people get absorbed in these things. And of course, the absolute horror and nonsense of these, the conspiracy theorists and so on, which strikes me as, as being beyond insane.
Oh, well, we are living in the years where conspiracies are beginning to become true. We're not conspiracy theorists anymore. We're conspiracy analysts.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
But I do see because sometimes they take you down a rabbit hole where people are giving a conspiracy theory, let's say, but they're being so convincing in their language and talking to someone that people become quite gullible and they then stop doing the deciphering themselves or sensing whether this is true or not.
Right, yes. That's actually true, because I think what I take from that is that there's something about, all the so-called esoteric and some weird theories and so on. If you could, it's all right if you sort of entertain them lightly, because they're just fresh ideas, alternative ways of looking at things. And you shouldn't make the assumption. Say, look, why not like this? But it needs that inner distance from it, not to be, when people get hold of it, or rather, you see a wrong phrase, not people get hold of it, but it gets hold of them.
Yes, that's what happens.
Yeah, I know.
I have many people come to me with the latest conspiracy theory, and I will look into it, but I have to then say to them, don't get too attached to this. You're not actually properly connected to it. It's just something you've read on the internet. You've got to live your life until that conspiracy theory starts happening and affecting you in some way.
Yes.
Not a lot you can do about it. You've got to just try and develop yourself so that you can become aware of, well, you should be able to center yourself so that you can feel whether something's true or not. That's obviously development.
That's so true. And you're pointing to something which is of very human and practical significance in Goethe's approach, even that basic proposition that we are threefold, there's just the thinking part and the being part, the moving part, but treating each of these three as of equal value and significance, which is quite extraordinary, because you see something goes wrong when somebody gets something in the head, and they're just in their head. It's nothing to do with their actual physical existence, and they're not in touch with their environment, and not even in touch with their feelings and themselves, and not aware of themselves in its process and so on.
I think their emotions go into overdrive, and they connect them emotions to what theory is.
Yes. Yeah. So there's that practical overtone. But coming back to this, then I can even see it myself. This is getting personal anecdotal, but years ago, when would it be? It was the time just before 1970, 1969 or something. It's like talking about the Stone Age or something. And I remember I was actually living in a house near Bennett, and actually together with, in the same house with Bryn Ring, who was the brother and sister of Meredith Ring and so on, who knew Bennett. Anyway, I could see myself now and realizing, and that suddenly struck me, people can believe in anything. I did. And you see, obviously it's true, but it struck me at the time absolutely with blinding force. It doesn't matter what crap it is. People can believe in it. What is this vulnerability or power or madness which is there present? And so when I started writing myself, I was always trying to be careful as much as I could of saying, well, this is what I believe. This is a possible thing. Or so-and-so said this, and I'm just reporting what they said, but never going to say, I have the truth. I am seeing something, and this is how it is. But I'm just amazed that the books come out and people are pronouncing, I have the truth. Here it is. You must follow this, and this is what's real. And I think, oh, surely they need to see a doctor or something about them.
That's ego, isn't it?
Oh,
And
ego.
people, gullible people, I would say, listen to someone with that kind of ego, that charisma. This is how people end up in cults and things like this,
Oh,
isn't it?
yes, they do.
So they must be wanting something, or there's something missing in their lives that they need to follow someone like that. Or they don't understand, perhaps, if we're talking about language, the language of how this man or woman is talking at them to convince them to believe in what they're saying, whatever this theory is.
Yes, I hardly bear to go into what's happening around people like Trump and so on, and in Putin now. This complete nonsense being broadcast out, and you get swathes of populations believing it, and you think it's because it sort of suits their own nefarious purposes and so on, and it leads into endless speculations. But I want to get back to mention my approach, because I know you're interested in a new channel, getting people to talk about their books, and I wanted particularly to mention the book I did now 10 years ago, I can't remember, called a Gymnasium of Beliefs in Higher Intelligence. As you see, I can hardly say the title.
So gymnasium beliefs in higher intelligence. No, I can't say it.
Good, you did pretty well, Betty. Gymnasium of Beliefs in Higher Intelligence. You see, if you had to do beliefs in higher intelligence, not this is the book about higher intelligence, I don't know. So I had this dilemma in my writing. I often get this dilemma. It's a moral dilemma. Why am I writing about this? How can I write about this? And I didn't want at all to convince I'm just another voice saying, oh, this assuming some kind of theory about the esoteric or human evolution, whatever it is, and just trying to pass it on to people and that sort of thing. But just say, well, I just maybe helpful to quote Nietzsche at this point. I used to love one of his sayings, which is say, you should treat great ideas like cold baths, quick in and quick out. You see,
Love a bit of Nietzsche.
Isn't it great? This notion, quick out. You see,
Yeah, that's
don't
very
stay
good.
there. You just become obsessed. And people, it's the old Gurdjieff, and tell me he was so insightful, Gurdjieff, about, identification. And there's also modern, meme theory about, that these memes or patterns, whatever they are, actually like parasitic viruses inhabiting the brain and consuming its energies and feeding itself and propagating itself and so on. And it's actually like that. And who's that guy who did I'm trying to remember his name. There's an American writer who talked about this. It was in terms of, he pictured language as a kind of virus which aliens had brought into the human race.
No, I did not. No, I don't know that one. I know that was it Thoth, the Egyptian god who gave people writing, was very annoyed with him for doing that because he said they will stop using their memory. But that was writing, not language.
Writing,
but he's saying language came from an alien race.
You're not ready though. Just yes, actually, it was an actual alien virus. And they usually were talking about crazy ideas you have. It's like then I can't remember now, the astronomer Fred Hoyle. That's right. He talked about how things coming into humans, literally from outer space. certain kinds of diseases and all the rest of it. But there is a sort of that whole way of thinking coming into us. But there's this notion of being the ordinary way of speaking. I think this is. You say, well, tell us, Debbie Elliott, what do you think about so and so, and you come out with it. You see, but there's this other side of it which you're well aware of in terms of some occult and esoteric kind of thing. They know it's not. It's what's a thinking you, and that there's some process going on which is thinking us. I don't know if you ever felt that or seen that or entertained that idea, and of course Krishnamurti was into this. Those things. I think it's nonsense. It's usually the other way. Think I.
Well, sometimes I feel like my thoughts are not my own.
No. Right.
Rudolf Steiner says that early humanity, before we became properly dense like this, we walked with the gods. So we conversed with the gods. So all language then would have been used for purposeful, it wasn't chit chat and gossip. It was behind it. Then the gods left us, and we were given messages from the gods via the angels. So the angels would talk to us. As we got denser and denser, the angels retreated, but the angels still talk to us. But so do the demonics, he says. So we can hear, we don't, it's not saying, hi, I'm Lucifer, I'm giving you a thought. They're whispering or into your ear, your mind, and that's where thoughts are coming from. They're not ours.
I do, because that chap, I've forgotten his name now, he wrote the bicameral mind. He did about 3,000 years ago. People were still able to talk with the gods, and then it's like one side of their brain was talking to the other side of the brain, so the thoughts were then their own. But that shift, for me, it led me to wonder, that it would be another shift out of that into something very different, because this notion of, again, it seems so obvious. I am a being, a so-called human being. I've got these powers, and I think and I talk. But there's something rotten in that whole basic position, and you taste it when you say your thoughts are not your own, and your actions. It's maybe a simple thing. Sometimes I'm doing things physically, and I'm just suddenly becoming aware of this, and I'm sort of doing all this, and I say, well, it says, am I doing this? But it's my body doing this. But I'm just astonished. This is all going on, making us suffer, frying something up, and this is going here and going. And I think, what's going on? I don't know. I mean, this is incredible, isn't it? It's like
we're being asleep all the time, then, aren't we? Because we're not operating ourselves. There's something in us that's operating for us.
Yeah. And you think about asleep, you see this waking up, you see, well, I think, well, what wakes up is not that kind of, because you can get that kind of, I don't know, thinking personality or memory and mind and kind of arising. It can think about, start thinking about these sort of things. But it's a question of, I put it into what wakes up, because if this thing which can register, there's something up or whatever it is, and start something, don't know what it is not what wakes up, because what wakes up is something different.
Yeah, is it us? Is it me?
yeah. And imagine, I was just thinking, in terms of years ago, when I become more conscious, if myself, as I kind of dimly aware of myself, wakes up and becomes conscious, it would be horrible, because of giving me power. I don't want this to have power at all, because it's idiotic. So how can we deal with all this? Has led me in my book, The Gymnasium. And I love the word gymnasium. I spent a long time trying to find the title. They got gymnasium taken from the Greek, and they did have an idea of some kind of like three-centered education in the gymnasium. It wasn't just the physical, but there was a recitation of poetry, this kind of thing, music, and all this kind of thing. So I think it's ways in which Gurdjieff drew on that, possibly, but it's certainly a possible thing. And what can do, Jim, and what are these ideas for? These ideas are not necessarily to believe in. They're just to give us a workout. They're dumbbells, you know. So anthroposophy, Gurdjieff, whatever it is, Hegel, dumbbells. You just lift up, up, da, up, da, up, da, up.
Spiritual exercises.
Doing exercises, that's right. And you think, well, what's the point of these exercises? Now that comes for each to something very interesting. Doing such exercises, but this, and it, for me, was focused in the conversation I had with Bennett many years ago, and he said it's good. All these sort of things don't change us in a way, but he used a wonderful metaphor. I liked it very much. It was useful. And he said it's to keep up muscle tone. As you do, you've got to do this right. To keep up muscle tone. He said, why is it good? Because he's always insisted towards the end of his life, and this is extraordinary. He said, all these practices, they don't shift you at all. They can't. It's just keeping muscle tone so that what can really work in us, and he called it supernatural, can work in us.
So we're opening ourselves up.
Yeah.
To come in. Okay, I like that, because at first I didn't know where you was going with that, and I was a bit like, oh, I hope they are doing something. But I do see. I think a lot of this is about preparing us for something else. But what is that supernatural? Continue.
By being supernatural, it's a factor. It is beyond the range of ordinary perceptions and not conceptual tools and all the rest of it. And so that's the situation we're in. We can say, well, we're like flashes into my mind just an image now. You talked about angels before. You might be living amongst spirits and angels and elementals and everything like this, whatever. But we're doing it in a kind of, I don't know what, thin way. We're not really strongly aware of them, you see, so we don't have the words, the terminology to describe what's happening. But of course, that terminology came from previous ages. I like the
I'm with you all the way on that. Absolutely, we're too dense in all meanings of the word.
Go on with meaning what?
We're too dense in all meanings of the word. We're too dense physically, and we're too dense up here to be able to see the elementals and the angels.
Yeah. It's lovely. I think, just responding and say, I just love the idea of the spirits, the elementals, and so on. Like, my background is in hard physics and all the rest of it, and I think, well, I want it all. well, this as well, but just treated as there are things we can't pin down, and you try and pin it down, and you get nonsense. It slips through your fingers, so to speak. And I think, and so again, Mr. Blake, do you really believe there are angels? And I would look and I go, duh. I don't know. But I love to speak about angels. I love the poetry of Rilke about angels. So now we come to poetry and fiction, which is, I just noticed this strange new smell here. I wonder what that is.
And as you said that, this light just came across you. It's really nice. Sunlight came in, lit you up like an angel's.
Oh my God!
Appeared beside you, and was telling you what to say.
Oh, that's lovely. That really is lovely. Yeah, but again, it's so simple in a way, but so puzzling, I don't get it. Is all this, is this true, or do you actually believe in it? Well, it reminds me, of course, of that classic interview with Jung, he's asked, do you believe in God? He said, no, I don't believe in God. I know there is God, this kind of thing, but I want to avoid that even to know there is God. And I think, well, sometimes God, because I went through a period, it's been over the last 30 years ago now, and it comes and goes a little bit, and it's a puzzling phenomenon where I would say things, sometimes be by myself, and I would sort of say things, and sometimes talking with other people, and it would be contain things which were thinking, why on earth am I saying this? But I just knew, or there was that sense that the saying was significant, and it wasn't asserting anything. Anything, but it's about God or having inner bodies or whatever, something like this. But this strange thing, because it's, well, you touched upon it. You said your thoughts are not your own, but there's sometimes this utterance, and I'm very keen on utterance. Saying, getting oneself to say, not because it makes you more important or you're saying something wise or anything, but just the saying, the authenticity of saying and so on, which is an essential part of being in the gymnasium, got to be able to express. And that leads us to the theatre I might talk about later. Well, the point of it, you see, like, you take something like, for me, the great poem, Do I Know Elegies of Rilke, where he begins talking about the angels who, if I cried, would hear me amongst the chorus of assenting angels. This his famous statement when he was striding the battlements of Duina Castle in the thunder and lightning storm, and he hammed it all up as a poet. But my God, it's really marvelous. He goes on and he says, well, is he actually talking about beings called angels? And you think, well, go away.
Is that because it's too much for you to handle?
No, it's not. Well, there. You see, a lovely phrase like, beauty is the terror we're just able to bear. Some of strange phrases like, you come out with a phrase like some of the sayings of the Bible or Shakespeare or whatever, they just go, wow, because this form, this jewel of language has been there, and it reverberates. And there was this, I was into it, trying to express it, understand it years and years ago when I was into dialogue and speech and so on, about there are ideas which don't neither assert nor deny anything. They just are. There's a certain kind of thoughts which are like that, and I can't express it any better than that. And it's touched upon even by Freud and psychoanalysts and so on. This kind of thing, but it's usually concepts or things expressed are in what's called a space of contention, of argument, of conflict. For and against, agree, disagree in this case, but there's some things that are just said, and they're just said. And that's it. It doesn't matter about you agreeing or disagreeing with them at all. And that's something very precious one can find in literature and language. You just read this, and it's there you are. And it's so simple. It's like that thing would flash in my mind that I said this about when I was younger. I don't have as much now. You know it still very well, don't you? You could get so absorbed in a book, in this magic and this other world. It's incredible. You're in this trance state and you think what it is, and you can come and enjoy it and swim in that world. And
it is weird, isn't it, that fiction or even non-fiction, you can get just as caught up in, why do them words take you to another world?
Yes.
About reading it, I know some people, I suppose the younger generations today, would get caught up in a film or a TV series, which is why I started this new channel on YouTube called Books Are Us, because I'm trying to encourage people to read
books.
But why do words have such an effect on us? And obviously these authors have written books in such a way that we get drawn in. Lord of the Rings still has impact now, like 100 years later. The books of Narnia still have impact now, so they must have something in them words, in that way it's written, that touches us inside. Touches the soul.
Touches the soul. Why not say it that way? That's exactly how it is. And it's I just remember how I was expressing to a friend yesterday about this. You get something which sounds so good, it must be good. I don't know what the phrase was, but it was, and you think, well, that's giving yourself over to some kind of, then you get this negative, that's just subjective or just emotional or something like that. But no, it is the mystery. I was trying to remember the words by this mathematician, Rudy Rucker. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a great popularizer of mathematics. And he knew a friend of mine, and who reported a saying of his. He said, uh, there is available to us a time machine. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, it's a typewriter. Because what he meant, you could write a story and that puts you into this other times and worlds. And you see, now most people will think, well, this is just a picturesque way of describing it. But notice, picturesque, you see, it's still part of a power of language. And it's not really so. And they say, well, if we want to know about time and space, we go to physics. Now, as you see, my background in physics, and I really respect it. I don't like people messing around with ridiculous fantasies, but there is not the whole story. And if you get them understanding things like time, you need to go to literature. Oh, a little about Proust, research into lost time, this famous book. It's all there. And T.S. Elliott, time past and time future allow but a little consciousness. To be conscious is not to be in time, but only in time can the moment be remembered. And he goes on and on. I adore that. You mean that poem I read aloud in various ways myself or with other people about 100 times, just I go over and over it. So that's what you implied a moment ago. I've forgotten when it was. You said we go back to these things and they're also contact with eternity.
Yeah, it's timeless.
Something timeless. And you see, this horrible world now, and you see the latest is supposed to be best, and often the latest is the worst possible crap there has ever been.
Yes, I'm sorry, I do have to agree with that.
No, it's not. We don't advance, whatever it is. Look here, what does it mean? Like Goethe's stuff or Steiner stuff, you're so much into all the root races and but this incredible images. I still remember the thrill of reading. So it looked like I remember the fifth gospel, the redemption of thinking, which touched me very, very deeply. And you suddenly there is as you say, something comes to presence with you. You see, and I know it's not to be in command of my actions and decisions, but still there is something which is a joining, a participation in this. And there is a element in it which is, can be to some degree philosophically examined. And I'm these days often citing that last book by my one-time colleague, Henry Bortoff, who was a student of Bennett, his last book treating appearances seriously is really quite masterly because he was a very, very good teacher to communicating ideas. Wish more people would read that book. But he's got hold of, from his studies of continental philosophy in Goethe, as well as what he got from JGB, all kinds of things, which is how anybody, real person, goes on. They don't do one kind of thing. They go, this diversity, and they go all over the place like you do, you can do, and then in a way, it's the evidence of your reason is that you're able to entertain almost anything from any source. It doesn't have to.
Said do that as well. He said, go and learn about everything else and then come to me.
Yeah. Have a good time. It's almost like sow your wild oats.
These things, these other ways are trying to help us look at things in other ways. Like I can't deny Steiner, Gurdjieff, even Madame Blavatsky and others, I can't think of their names yet, have made me think in a different way that I probably would never have found by myself. I doubt. They've made me look at, not so narrow-minded, open to more opportunities, or perhaps thinking of something being said in a certain way that could be taken in different connotations, I suppose, which has helped open up my understanding of I say the divine, the earth, the universe, and just my place on it, and every other being's place on it.
This sounds to me like I meant by the gymnasium. It's sort of maybe too much in sort of effort and so on, but it's just this action that you get into. And it reminded me when you're speaking of, to go revert to a Gurdjieffian, impression food. You see, it's aside, it's very undeveloped. He just mentioned, the scheme of three kinds of food of Gurdjieff. don't you? Ordinary food, air, and impressions. And impressions of food is quite mysterious, you see. I think as a kind of food, it's quite revolutionary. You're the only person I think who ever said anything like that. And what does it mean? Well, it means like this. Just as you're saying, you can go and you can actually, it sounds like, reminds me of the phrase starving in the midst of plenty. There's so much around us, and people don't have treat it as food because I'm so clumsy in expressing it because it's all mixed up in this thing, agreeing what disagreeing, what's true, what's not true. But just say it is food. It's to love a phrase, which is a common phrase, which when I was in Cambridge studying philosophy of science and so on, we were going to geological sciences, and I was thinking, why bother with that? It didn't seem to be very glamorous geology. And then she said, no, I treat it like grist through the mill. I love that phrase, grist through the mill.
Never heard of grist through the mill.
No,
everything goes through the mill, but the grist is the hard stuff, isn't it?
It's the hard stuff to help the grinding process, you see, but that's what you do, is throw it into the process. It's lovely because it's physical, and it's that kind of action. It meant, it was anything like geology, it was just other stuff, is other metaphors, like it's something to chew on, it's something to get your teeth into, all these concrete metaphors, you see. And often you can, things you can bear, like to get into some things, you don't even have to, so to speak, understand them. You don't have to be able to comprehend them in any ordinary way at all. Even if you fail to understand them, you can get something from it. But it's all an action in us about. You think of what it is. It's a miracle you get the stuff, these lines on paper.
Oh, yes.
And you look at it, and this weird stuff happens, just thinking, ah! And immediately just reading, she entered the room, and immediately we're in this bloody room. And it's all just a squiggle there, and it's crazy. Who would have believed?
Magical.
Pardon?
But then words are magical, aren't they?
They are magic. They are the magic. They are the greatest magics. You could treat it as divine magic or satanic magic. They do it to us. So this is, I think, something which might be emerging now for more people. Who knows whether it's a matter of more or less, whether it's a matter of majority view or minority view, esoteric or ordinary, and all this kind of thing. I really don't know. But something about that is being approached because it's just factually, just whatever's happened in the 20th century, there's been this possibility of a field of discourse which is vastly multicultural and varied. But only if you choose to belong to it, because you get all these potentialities now, but people ignore it and go in a dirty little corridor of their bigotry and stick to it. And refuse, and actually deliberately, consciously refuse to access any other information.
Yes, closed-minded people out there, a lot of them,
who boast about being closed-minded, even, because they say they are the righteous. So where can we? But there, it's then interesting if you say, well, still a lot of people go around and say, trying to find out what's the best one or who's true, who's got it, and my life, I remember engaging with people interested in Goethe's ideas, and they're reporting to me friends they had who said, this person you're talking to, is he a man number 5? Otherwise I won't want to meet him if he isn't a man number 5, and all this kind of complete gibberish nonsense.
I get that from a lot of people. If I promote something, then they go, do you think that's a man number 3 or a man number 4? And I'm like, to me, it's not. If he or she is putting across something that's interesting, I don't try to categorize them.
That's right.
But people like categories. They like to put people in categories. They like to put events into categories, and they like to put their thinking into categories. And I think hopefully what we're trying to say is you don't need categories. We can take from each one and put it all together. It's like when the scientists don't talk to the geologists who don't talk to the biologists. And if they all talk together, they might have a better understanding of what's going on.
That is really so true. And it's it's hidden behind all, not hidden, but all this, what is this action, this process, this energy which is in reading and writing? I got into it once as seeing a certain kind of pattern. It's like, oh, well, like habitual phrases. It's just like I keep on using that phrase and it annoys the hell out of me, but I can't stop it. It's just kind of damning, because I know what happens. You've got a page and you write something on it. Okay, you write it, and there's one action. Then you look at it, and you're so-called reading, and out of this reading comes an action, and you can write something more. It's just how the one unfolds in the other, and it's that dance, that flow is what's really happening, and is always joyous. It's always beautiful and joyous and all the rest of it, and it's seemingly without effort very much sometimes, and that's an obscure thing to say, because all these things we say describing the process are themselves part of literature. Everything is like a literature, even the scientific explanations or so on. It's a kind of branch of literature. I came across this wonderful thing the other day about something in it. I've forgotten her name, but I'm rather kind of fond of her. She often lectures on things to do with physics and mathematics. She's got a lovely voice and so on. So what she did this thing about, she did a reading from Newton's laws of motion by candlelight.
Oh, actually, that would make it quite magical. You'd probably be more intense listening to it.
Yes, right. She's absolutely beautiful. It was just absolutely extraordinary, because I was been in this phase with my friend Jessai and the theatrics and so on, all the work we've done. You know Jessai, don't you, personally? Yeah. Of starting from Beelzebub, which seems to be such a forbidding and loquacious text, and to something which is dramatic and interesting and human for a start, something like that. And so how do we, so it's this notion of taking a text which is appears to be austere and just intellectual, you see, but if you, whatever it is, you can read it in a certain way so it becomes part of the magic of language. It's just in, because something like Newton wrote incredibly well in the way. It just, his articulation was fantastic, and he's talking about right motion and inertia and all these things. Oh, most people say, oh, that's scientific and mathematical. That can't be literary. But it's really not true. The original scientists in their writing were incredibly literate. I mean, really. So just beautiful writing is there in it. So this notion, and I came across recently, which I didn't know, that with our friend Josiah, who people don't know, he lives in Costa Rica, as American, a theater director and actor.
You've done shows with him on your channel. I have on mine.
Beg your pardon?
You've done shows with him on your channel, and I have on mine. So yeah.
Oh, that's right. And that's why you participated in them. You know what he's like. But I didn't know that there was this. It's not widely known that Plato is a great philosopher, of ancient Greece, and it's a very strong idea, because he wasn't personally written about for a couple of centuries until after his death, Plato, so we don't know. And it's the idea that he originally wanted to become a dramatist. And he was in Athens and so on. You have this incredible respect for the drama and these competitions, Imagine you eventually get out there, it's an audience of 5,000 or something that's going to see your work in the grad competitions. And the story goes that his new play is clutched in his hand, so to speak. He's going on the street, and he found this group when they were talking, and amongst them, this group was this character he come to know was Socrates. And he's just so enamored by this conversation going on that he burnt his manuscript and set himself on a search for a way of, I call it, making a dramatic philosophy.
Beautiful. So he was influenced by one of the greatest philosophers ever.
Yeah.
Ah,
So his dialogues, you see, really are a version of theatre, which appear, because they're called philosophy, you think about them in one place, you see, and it's not the theatre, which is like Aeschylus or Sophocles and so on, which is over here and dealing with it. But that's, so there might be, and over the years I've tried to do things, even with the dramatic universe and so on, to take passages and read them. I remember I did a piece of reading of dramatic universe with music by Olivier Messiaen and so on. It's just like, so the early days, you used to do jazz poetry readings, which was so in the 60s they were going on, but no, do it and not treat it, oh, this is like this, and here's the fun stuff over here. It's a bit like, why should the devil have all the good tunes? It's, but so anyway, see what you see about this. I'll send you the link if I remember with this when we're doing it. I can still see the image there with the beautiful candelabra and the candles, and she's reading from the his discourse. Must be from the Principia of the Laws of Motion. And I think that's the way to do it. That's
you can. She had the atmosphere, and also by doing it by candlelight in his day when he wrote that.
Exactly.
The whole atmosphere is different than just somebody sitting in a studio reading at you.
Exactly.
There is a difference. I can take that. I understand that, and hopefully our viewers do as well. As you've probably seen when you see a one-man show, if they really put the right atmosphere or background to it, it really makes it come alive.
Because that's the reality. It's somebody speaking in a certain place and time and context, and in that it's coming out of his life world. His situation is not something flattened or stereotyped or anything like that. And suddenly then flashed across my mind, what the hell was it? I don't know. It comes and it goes. Grace, is like I feel talking about these matters, as I've got a very simplistic picture of I was buying the very cheap little pictures about to do with early people and fairy tales, and there's this sort of woman, also a peasant woman, sitting in a chair, and around her swirling these images of elements from the stories of fairies and so on. I just loved it. It was just, I'm feeling like it now. It's just all these things floating around because they're not mine to control or anything like this. And you're going to be not to be anxious about controlling it because it is.
We were very lucky to grow up with books like that because I see today a lot of my friends who had little children, they don't have magical books like that. I know Enid Blyton gets quite poo-pooed these days, but she brought me and my fellow people of my age into a world of magic and mystery and elementals and other beings, and we were talking earlier about Lord of the Rings and things like that. Okay, that's for when you're a bit older, but let me see if I can, and I remember having books with these kind of pictures in.
Yes. I love that. Lilies of the Valley.
That's it, yeah. So these kind of things influenced us from a young age.
Yeah.
Them kind of books are very rarely offered to children now.
Yes, and there's very strong elements who appear to try and deliberately stop them being made available, which are destroying them. Yes, that kind of thing.
But the importance of having them kind of books was to help us obviously develop our imagination as well. And that's something Gurdjieff was very implicit about, was developing your imagination and not daydreaming imagination. But that imagination also was what was bringing these wonderful books to us, whether they were implanted or told to these authors or whether they just developed it out of their imagination. I think it is important. I wish we could know which was the right way, but we need to encourage still the next generations to use their imagination. And maybe you could explain a bit why imagination is so important in the Gurdjieff work. because that comes from words, doesn't it? We still have to develop our imagination from words and
Yeah.
language.
Well, I just cite my famed forebear, William Blake, who treated imagination as the divine property. And that was the way of access. Of course, Gurdjieff himself, most of his writing, denounced imagination. Then he said he'd make, but a certain point in the third series, he said, I'll make it the exception. There is this way where imagination is the key to it.
Yeah, no daydreaming imagination, not that kind of imagination. He
Right.
needs like creative imagination that helps you develop yourself.
Just put in my mind this well, you appreciate very well, you understand very well. Like thoughts are going forward come and they go. It's just like you think I have entertained this thought, I understand it, I realize it. No, it's just coming and going again. And this sense of I loved it. There's a phrase for it, the magical. I'm talking about the third series where Goethe is talking about this.
Life is real only then when I am.
That's right. And part of it is that he is more or less not what he says in his words, but you have to imagine that you have real I. And you have to start imagining it. And he said you have to be careful and conscious of what you're doing is imagining it. And it's even the thought of it is influential because you suddenly realize, wow, because there is that side in us which is, and I think he describes it in similar ways, but I don't have to rely on his authority for this, which is constantly pretending. Because then say we're all the time pretending. If I say one of those phrases, all the time, is very suspicious of them, forgive me, but most of the time pretending might not turn it to advantage, but don't, especially in the, seems to me, and this leads to the work they're doing with Jesai on theatre and so on, that they kind of turn this pretense to advantage, because if the pretense is making us false, and which we're, like we're hiding from ourselves, we're hiding from other people, we're in self-deception and all this kind of stuff, which is absolutely true, and it's got to go pretending to, even ordinary people say, yeah, we're pretending to be something we're not, and all this kind of thing. Well, we turn it on its head and say, let's pretend to be something like, let's pretend to have real I. And I think, I'm presuming a lot of people in a way would be very shocked and say, but you don't actually have real I. How can you pretend to say no?
I got told off for that. I was saying to people, fake it till you make it. And I had a Gurdjieff person that we both know get in touch, and she was like, that's not the right way to teach them. I'm like, well, I'm not teaching them, I'm just offering them my
You're not teaching them. That's right. There you are. That's a very good little illustration, and I know your friend is very, very honorable and well-intentioned and so on, but that sense of, here is the teaching, it must be protected, it must be in the right terms. I say, no. And they make fun of it. That's disrespectful. No, it's not.
It's not. And even Gurdjieff said, have fun. People keep asking me where that quote is, and I wish I could remember, but I know it's in probably Views from the Real World or something like that. But he said, having fun, or maybe it was one of the records of meetings, because I think he was talking to someone. But
no, really,
don't have fun, it becomes strict, straight-laced, stifled. I'm using lots of S's there. I can't think of anything else, but I'm not taking the mickey out of it. But like you were saying earlier in this show, we need to add humor. And when they made creation, there was humor added. We need, in our development and our creation, add a bit of humor and have fun. Enjoy it. Don't.
Quite a bit about this. We don't add the humor; we just discover the humor that's there. We don't have to put it in. As I always remember a friend of mine at university, he was studying dentistry, but he also played music, and Bach in particular. He said, when I play Bach, it was never, when you're playing Bach, never put emotion into it. That's what most people try to do in playing music, to put their emotion into it. This is sinful. He said, it's ridiculous. You get out of the way, and the music has the true emotion in it.
Play.
And then it comes out, and that sort of thing. So where we are, I don't know, but it's this celebration of this, I feel this sometimes, lovely simplistic current about a current, a picture, a current, of flow, an action which is doing it, which relates for me to puzzles I had years ago and over the years, just thinking about like practices like exercises and so on. What was this happening? You sit down in a room and do some doodah stuff, and
doodah stuff.
yeah.
It made me laugh. Yeah.
Sense your right arm and then feel in your left tit or something. It's whatever goes on, these kind of things you do. But I think, well, what anyway? And there's this there was this side to British Shah's teaching, and I might mention something about it later on, which I sort of hit the thing. He used to say that such things already draw out stories from his tradition, and saying that these exercises are basically to pass the time, allowing something which is already going on in us, the true evolution going on in us, to flourish without being inhibited. And I just love it. Was just very, very powerful inversion. You see, as I say, refer to what I said earlier. These exercises as such don't do it, whatever it is. This could ooh kind of thing. It is which is it's like the phrase which is there in advance of ourselves. I rather like that phrase. This real current is there in advance of us. We don't have to push ourselves into, because it's in advance of us. So we are not. You get the idea if you get into the occult things and esoteric things, as they're called, these labels. You're doing something very special, which is going to make you special. And I think this is what most people feel, at least when they initially get into whatever it is. You're going to do something special, it's going to make you special. And
we want to be special.
Yeah, very, very hard not to want that kind of thing. But if you don't say no, it's almost like it's already in progress, and our job is to catch up. This is how I began to think about it. It's a strange way of talking about things, but it's like this. We don't have to make it happen. And so there's something in the residue, I think, of the fourth wave literature, which I think Gurdjieff promulgated in a certain way because it belonged to what he saw was necessary at the time, whatever. Which is all this effort, pushing, forging ahead, the hero, very, very macho kind of approach, God, beat the chest, suffer, you bastard, they'll kill you, sweat, blood, tears, it's Churchill. I have nothing to offer you but blood, tears, toil, and sweat. This kind of thing.
Oh, that was marvelous.
Well, that was the whole attitude. And things say no, as you say, have fun. This side of things, and do it by humor.
You say some very wise words there, because I used to be chasing after things all the time, and I realise now, no, I shouldn't have been chasing. Exactly what you're saying, I couldn't have put it any better than what you said. It's just like always trying to find the end result, so I could become that special person.
Yeah.
It's the process, really. Yeah. We're changing all the time if we let it.
Now we had we said about talking about them, reflecting back about special people, and it was been a great theme for me about the last 30, 40 years, this thing about the future of the fourth way, and we went to after Bennett died and all that time period, the 60s, 70s, what the hell was going on, who's in charge of it, what the hell is this fourth way? And it was, and I used to have taken a theme, I constantly hark back onto it, which is the swan song of the golden oldies. The golden oldies being those who claim direct descent from Gurdjieff, kind of thing, how the imprimatur binded on their foreheads, I'm a legitimate, like the Pattersons of this world, just claims he's got the authentic line in himself, and I think, well, fuck you. I mean, you can just, that's your way of doing it, that's fine. But they began the fact that they were dying off, and obviously people were beginning to register and manifest this kind of anxiety. What do we do now? Because it was like, who's going to tell us what to do? Who's going to tell us what to really believe in? Who's going to tell us what the right way is, and all this kind of thing? And it's been a rather not really articulated, but since the last few decades, that's happening amongst all these groups, and they're adapting in their various ways. And most of it, of course, like any kind of adaptation, is just trying to avoid the actual change which is happening and put it into terms which sound like the old thing. But there is
They're evolving all the time, aren't they? I get asked
yes.
quite a lot by people that subscribe to my channel, and I can only say to them, go and read the books. The books, especially the first three, will tell you how to do the Gurdjieff work. But then they always come back to me, but he says we need a teacher and a school.
Oh yeah.
I have no answers there unless
No,
maybe a school
no.
will come knocking on your door. But if there isn't one
Yeah.
around locally for you now, you've got to do it by yourself.
And that's where almost, flashing of association brings back to where it started from about language and books and so on, which is your deep concern. I just remember when, I was catching up with the books, as you know, in our conversation before, I was influenced by Colin Wilson and The Outsider and
Book
started.
that changed my life, but yeah.
Well, it did, and I just met him actually personally once. Anyway, and
Oh, you do?
oh
Oh,
yeah, yeah. I must have told you my story because there was a seminar Bennett set on in Sherborne, a weekend seminar. He arranged just for Colin Wilson. Colin Wilson wrote to him wanting to know about Gurdjieff's occult powers. So Bennett turned it round to this kind of event, and there was various lectures, and I gave one, and I loved telling the story. Wilson was there, and he heckled me. This is wrong, he said, and the Gurdjieff book is like this, But then afterwards we talked and got friendly, and he gave me a copy, or he signed my copy of The Mind Parasites, which I think is one of his nicest books, and so on.
yeah.
But anyway, all about Conor Wilson was there, and so I began to find out about the groups and so on. But I was right from the beginning skeptical about this. The whole model of the groups, and he was to develop people who really knew the stuff, and they set up a group and blah blah blah. So you get this transmission. I did quite buy into it, and it was. I remember one of the people who do this trick. I don't know if it still goes on in workbooks in libraries. They put cards in with ring this phone number, and I did this.
Yeah, I don't think around here they're not allowed to do it. I know that. I know they got, or they get taken out of them books now anyway.
Oh, really?
Around here, yeah.
It was quite rampant at one time,
Yes.
in the 60s. And the guy came to see me in my house, and we talked about it. I didn't realize he got converted to Scientology anyway. So that was out of it. But then it was where to go. And I met Bennett, and for me, Bennett was very fortunate. But this is the time when I'd also met David Bohm, you see, in quantum physics. So it wasn't just Bennett. But I always count myself lucky because of various reasons, and that he had a scientific mind. He was open to discussion and conversation. He wasn't so authoritarian and fixated, and he was an explorer and all this kind of stuff. But it came around to people in groups, and that's one of my obsessions, or bees on my bonnet, or things I hark on about groups. In a way, detest groups. And it was one of my slogans, I call it, to say, if you join a group, you lose half your will. Because you begin to believe in the group, and the group knows something, and the group has rules and so on. And I've seen this, it's weird. Instead of any kind of group, and the people in the group will start inventing rules which are supposed to apply to what they can do and can't do. They never have been shown them or built into them or put upon them anyway, but everybody would invent out of their imagination these rules which confine them, and they confine them to a certain way so they can talk about certain things and all this kind of thing. But anyway, I was set up this, Debbie, this for me was very pragmatic kind of.
Yeah, group is not for life. It's just for Christmas.
Yes, that's really spot on, you see. Because I was just saying to you, okay, fine, you join a group, and something that gives you a kick, can give you elevation in new worlds, new people, and so on, for a time.
Mm-hmm.
I said, have you seen how you're going to get out of the group? You look at you askance, get out of it, but it's lovely, it's good, it's the fire, the thing. I said, no, it becomes your prison if you keep it too long.
Yep.
I just said, Bennett kept hinting at this. Various things he says entirely, just for 2 or 3 years, then you got to, well, at least reevaluate, you not just carry on, but nearly every time people carry on. And that's death.
That's mechanical programming.
Mechanical programming, and it's self-calming and all the rest of it. It's also mixing up kind of, because these groups turn into little social units, and they're good for, kind of, like a
Yeah.
sewing
Definitely a lot
circle.
of the things I go to is because of the social thing, really. I might not be getting the
Mm.
esoteric teaching I used to get anymore. But then that's when I realized, well, I've got to give that a break for a while.
Yeah, that's it takes something, doesn't it, to make a break. But you've got to do it. It's rational, it's reason. This is how things work, and people do these misplaced loyalties. And Shah had another clue about this. He said people get into these groups and so on because they're fulfilling needs which should have been satisfied another way, like needs for companionship and sociality also got from their family or the friends and so on. But no, they're not missing it in life, so they find something else. And I also remember, I'm going to use a rude word now. There's a chap who used to come to Coombe Springs, and he was a very interesting character. He was a junkie, a laborer, and so on. But he's like a testament to Bennett's completely open-heartedness towards people, and anybody could go in. And he said, people come to a place like this because they want a good fuck, want to find a good fuck. So, it was just crude and so, but it points to something. They're not finding something which they should be getting in life, and then if they don't get it in life, then something gets twisted. Because they should be going into a group together. And there's a lot to do with the science known about, I don't know the science, but the research done into groups and so on. But one thing is sure, the great experts beyond used to say that it's true that just about every group believes it's immortal. In other words, they've got no sense of death in a group. And so this is for a time, and you got it, Debbie. You really got it. This is for Christmas.
Yeah.
And you've got to get out of it. And then people, what I do. And I say, well, you've got to do the thing.
You take what you've learned and go on and continue with your life. Even Gurdjieff was saying that to his own students. Get out. I've taught you what you need to know. Get out. But even though we say groups for Christmas only, remember a dog is for life if you do get a dog. A little puppy dog, just so people don't get it wrong.
Oh, right, yeah.
Animals are for life, but groups are just for Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. We'll see what comes after. I remember talking to somebody who wanted to be in all kinds of connections, and came to Seattle and so on wanted to make a group and form a group and do the movements and so on. And I was criticizing this or questioning all this. And they said, what do you do? And I said, well, you find some mates and you do something interesting.
This is what it is. He was like, what? I thought you were going to tell me what to do.
No, it's only that. You see, you just find your mates. You're going to find friends. You don't go on finding another group. And Ben made, I think, a kind of mistake in that. Well, I would criticize him for it when he had these groups and so on. And you see, what happens if people been in the group for 1 or 2 or 3 years, whatever, what would he do with them? Then he starts talking about advanced group or something, a better kind of group or a higher echelon group and so on.
In a circle.
Sort of in a circle sort of thing, making also. Well, there's really, and then what the word is, it's like a bit of a fake, because it was still, you see, the social structure was still the same. He was still the director of who was in the groups and who was not in the groups, you see. And that was the thing which it would always remain the same. And this is not just to have some mindless kickback against authority or anything like this, but it just cannot develop. Since you've got the person there in charge and he's always in charge, then it remains like that. It doesn't evolve out of ever. And I think we often wish people who would actually study sociology and psychology, ordinary psychology. And so I love this. There's a man called Elliott who wrote about this. He was a sort of anthropologist, psychologist, or how to call him. But he was talking about like the classroom in schools. He said, we have the teacher and the students. They're structured in such a way that they create ignorance, because you have a teacher, he means that the students there must be ignorant. Mm-hmm. And it's actually sociology of course, and people, you will get it. A lot of people just don't get it.
Yeah. This is why I like the Waldorf schools. I wish I'd gone to one. They don't teach.
Me too.
The teachers aren't like that with the children. They treat each child differently, and they understand these children are here to be taught, but not programmed. They're bringing out of them what these children really are, what they've got inside them.
No,
then I know what you mean, because a lot of people are always looking for someone to look up to. Going back to what you were saying about that, Bennett running it all. Yeah. So people put him on a pedestal.
It's always with the best of intentions.
Yes, always with the best of intentions. But it's because people then can't. Well, it's lack of confidence in themselves in some way, isn't it? That they can't go ahead and continue the work themselves. And I know that I've been like that. I've had moments where I'm just like, and then, you sit down and think about it, because you're supposed to be letting all this ruminate inside you anyway, and the answers will come out from inside as well as from outside in.
Well, it's kind of realism and say what will come out from inside, so it's the best you've got, so with it.
But the most important thing of any mystery school was the 2 words that were written above every entrance: know thyself. And if you can know yourself, then you can be more prepared of what to do next, of how to develop yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, then let's say your shadow side or your worries and that kind of thing will all come in when your teacher has left or has ended the group, or you're not happy in your own self.
Yeah. I was wondering, do I know myself better than I did 50 years ago? And I doubt it.
You're probably not the same person as you was 50 years ago.
That's a good point. You see, that's right.
That's why it's an ongoing process all the time.
That's right. It's an ongoing process. Fuck's not a thing. That's going down to this, the doings that count. And those.
I think a lot of people come to these groups because they don't know what to do with themselves. But they sense there's something more. I'm going to quote some Nietzsche now. He said the greatest art is the escape from boredom.
Yeah.
A lot of us, it's past that boredom threshold of there must be something more to life.
Right, yes. That's it. There must be something more to life.
Do you think this is a great moment to end this show?
Yes, I think so. That's enough to live by, because I have to comment to this end here that for me it's become just the facing up. I used to do it, ask it hypothetically at certain times. What it would be like if you never really know any more than you know now?
No, surely we can continue to learn more constantly. We never know everything, surely.
You never know anything, but Debbie, I'm going to say, well, but in this, in a way it's, I do this very carefully. Because the word no is a bit vague and so on, but you won't improve or get anywhere. And now, pausing there, because you might think, this is awful. And I'm going to throw in a theoretical point from Bennett. And he said, he was very clear about this. He was always warning, don't get into the way of thinking that tomorrow I'm going to improve. Tomorrow never comes, of course. And he had this strange expression, which might be incomprehensible. He said, progress, because he was very interested in progress, progress is within the present moment. not in future time. See, that's what he was constantly writing, future, not in future time.
Because
So,
it's all about the now,
yeah, yes,
right now.
in the depths of the now, in some
Yeah.
kind of depths, it's kind of this, and he struggled in life to get these ideas, which might be helpful to some people. That a certain kind of future is now and working in me. A certain idea, that the future is working in me in this to make this now, and all this kind of stuff. And if you try to sort it out in one's mind, it's very difficult, but it just touches people. And also people like Maurice Nicole, his book Living Time is so remarkable.
I recently did a show on my channel with a guy called Stuart France, who, from Living Time, Maurice Nicole's Living Time, he continued his own thought forms from that took him off into all other realms and peoples. And you can watch that interview on my channel. He's a wonderful little book. It's kind of poetry, more like prose, but with a poetic take to it. Living Time and Maurice Nicole's book seems to be popular again, which I'm really pleased about because it is my favourite Maurice Nicole book.
Is Living Time, is it? Is that what you're saying?
Living Time is, yeah. My friend Stuart Francis has written a book called The Nuances of Maurice Nicole.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Tell me more about this,
okay, yeah, I did an interview with
because
him.
it's one of the tragedies in the history of the Fourth Way, because Ouspensky was in London, split from Gurdjieff, started attracting people, and including people like Bennett and Maurice Nicole. And I think I got the impression that Maurice Nicole was sort of hang out together a lot. They were in the same groups and so on. But later on, of course, there came this denouncement by Ouspensky of Bennett and choose one or the other. And Maurice Nicole chose to stick with Ouspensky, and Bennett didn't. So they really were split. But you read their stuff, you think they should have been hand in glove, so to speak, together. They were just in the same business.
But Nicole did go to Gurdjieff after Ouspensky's death, because then he found out that Gurdjieff was still alive. So I'm wondering if he maybe met up with Bennett again out in France, in Paris.
No, it only mentions. I don't think so. I better look into that because it was a chance, but there was still that residue of the separation between people. And I was wondered, why didn't they talk to each other? Again, that's another thing. So here we are. We started with language. I want to say about it's reading and writing. It's important. We have Gurdjieff saying he'd abandoned what he would hope to do, maybe because of his illnesses, he didn't have the strength, and he started becoming a writer. He claimed never to have done it before and became a writer and so on. And books were his soldiers, breaking the new age. And so it's quite something that he did that. And it relates to the writing of scriptures, which is something I'm battling with to understand in my finale on the Enneagram, because I see the Enneagram as a way of understanding theatre and storytelling.
So we must discuss the scriptures at some point then, whether it's recorded or just privately. I'm quite queued up on the scriptures. I had my degree in divinity.
Wow, an expert! My God, well done.
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I know stuff.
All right. On that
Right, well,
note, we'll leave because we'll see as our listeners will appreciate it's just as a segment of a flow.
yes, no show ever ends.
That's right.
Thank
Thanks,
you everybody
Debbie.
for watching. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Bless you. Love you.
Love you too, and everybody else.